I posted about my bathroom makeover earlier today, but that wasn't the place to go into detail about what made me paint a whole room. Fuck you, pink. So here goes. My partner, a 44-year-old man, and I, a 41-year-old woman, have been together just about 15 years and have lived together in a house he bought for about 10. It's a male, one-bedroom, one-bathroom home with the basement remodeled to be another sleeping area. But in all this time, it never felt like a forever home. Child one came along, and we tossed around the idea of buying something else, but house shopping seemed like it could wait. Then Infection 19 and Child 2 appeared, and along with that, a skyrocketing housing market, and suddenly we found ourselves priced out of our own area. We waited too long and had both a woefully inadequate home and inadequate income to purchase a house that was 1/4 of the price 2 years earlier. So we decided to build an addition. He's a really handy guy and has lots of carpentry experience, so we started looking for a loan to renovate. We were rejected, but came up with a plan. Since the house was in his name only and we weren't married, we went to a lawyer who helped him sell the house to me for enough to pay off the mortgage with money left over to complete the work we needed done. Barely. The money went into his tax-free savings account, and I got busy. Something about me that is very relevant to the story is I am absolutely passionate about interior design. When I was a little girl, I watched Debbie Travis and any decorating show I could find. I had stacks of decor magazines. I spent hours and hours designing homes in The Sims. I've done a little renovating and have some basic knowledge, so let me tell you, when I got the chance to design and build my own home, I was ecstatic. I spent months planning and drawing every nuance of the floor plan, down to every electrical outlet. I priced out and planned every piece of furniture and fixture and wall covering to my taste. I scoured the marketplace for incredible deals on fixtures and materials. I planned my dream kitchen, and I planned, with my daughter, the fantasy forest bedroom of dreams. All within a razor-thin budget, with my partner and I doing the work we didn't absolutely have to hire contractors for. He was recently laid off from his job, so we decided I would work part-time and run the business I started and pad the rest of our living expenses on credit while he built the house and looked after the kids. It was fine at first, but progress was achingly slow. I began to get frustrated at the lack of actual work being completed, but I didn't want to nag at him, and I knew it was hard juggling the kids and renovations. Besides, jobs always take much, much longer than you plan, so I kept my mouth shut while he seemed to do less and less. 2 years in, and he had completed the foundation, most of the framing, the sheeting, and the metal roof. By this time, he wasn't really doing much day to day, wasn't talking about the renovations, and had sunk into a depression. I tried to be supportive, but he didn't open up to me. He booked an appointment for therapy, and I thought we would get him looked after. Then I could worry about the house later. By this time, I had added far more to my debt than I had planned, supporting him while he neither worked nor worked on the house. It got to the point where I decided I would give up on my dream home and just hire people to complete the work to the bare minimum until I could take over the interior finishing work myself. It would be a very basic shell, and disappointed would be an understatement. But as long as my daughter got the dream bedroom complete with a loft bed sculpted to look like it grew there and murals I would paint for her, I could get over it because my kids needed bedrooms, and at least I wouldn't have to break that promise I'd made her. He gave me a ballpark figure of what he thought it would cost in labor to finish. And when I got out my notebooks and went to compare what my budget said we had left compared to what was actually in the account, we'd bought a few small trees and some topsoil. He got quiet. He said, "I think I need to leave," and assumed this weird, stricken posture. His voice sounded funny, and when I looked at him, I guessed. I said, "What did you do?" He said nothing for a second, and then he told me he had spent it. All the money. Every last cent. He went on to explain that's why he'd been so depressed lately. But in my rage, I cut him off and told him to shove the poor me nonsense up his butt. I'm so sorry that destroying my life and ruining things for his kids made him sad. But forget that. He had pissed away tens of thousands of dollars over the course of 2 years on things like soda and cigarettes and bills he was never clear with me on, and who knows what else. He listened to me and his little girl, in our excitement, plan her dream bedroom. He watched me research micro-cement suppliers for months to find the right deal. He answered my questions about plumbing, heating, and electrical, all the while knowing it was never going to happen. He later explained that he had begun spending the money right away, and at first, it had never occurred to him that it wasn't his. And by the time it dawned on him that the money he wasted away was being paid each month by me, it was too late, so he just kept spending it until every last cent was gone. He took any chance his children had at adequate housing and wasted it away. Because now I'm in so much debt, I can't even sell and hope to qualify for another mortgage. I have a useless, partially finished addition rotting away on the side of my house that will only decrease in value over time, and I can never hope to afford to finish. I can't provide bedrooms for my kids, and the mortgage on this house has more than tripled and is squarely in my name with nothing to show for it. Renting would be even more in this market. I can't even afford to kick him out, and even if I could, I will not make my kid's father homeless since he's just recently started working again. My kids adore that man, and I just cannot be vindictive enough to hurt them by hurting him. I'm such an idiot for trusting him and not checking on that money periodically. He'd ask me for money every month for bills, but I just never did the math. I cried, I screamed, I broke up with him. I went to bed for a couple of weeks, only moving when I had to go to work or look after my kids. I did a makeover out of frustration on my bathroom, using money from the sale of his motorcycle, so I could maybe stand to live in this piece of junk male one bathroom house, but I just don't have a path forward with this. I could tell him to leave, but then my kids would be devastated. I'd be stretched beyond my limit, raising them alone and trying to take care of this house, job, and business, and I'd rather the money he pays in rent somewhere go to paying my mortgage. But what on earth am I supposed to do now? I'm sure I've left out details, so I will answer the questions and take the comments about my own idiocy on the chin. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. First, he needs to move down to the basement. Second, I would tell him exactly how much money he owes you, because all of that money was not his money to spend. It was understood to be money that would be going into improvements on the house. You should have documentation of how much of the money was for the sale of the house and how much was meant for the improvements, right? Tell him that he can either pay you that money now or he can pay it back on top of his rent. And yes, he owes you rent for the basement if he stays. If the kids are down there, too bad, so sad. He can sleep down there with the babies on an air mattress for all you care. If he doesn't like it, let him go. He's a terrible person. He can also explain to his children why they don't have bedrooms and why he has to go. Comment 2. This guy needs to be working. All day long. 2 jobs, weekends. He has a lot of bills to pay and he has spent thousands and thousands of dollars, so his focus for the next 10 years is work. Constant work. He did this to himself, and all that money needs to go into your account, and you give him a stipend out of it, or he moves out of the house. That's what you do if someone has a problem. He betrayed you for years. He chose every day to do this, for years. It's financial abuse, it's scumbag behavior. I wouldn't charge him rent, I'd take his money, and he needs to get a second job or he is out on his ear. Now for the update. A month has gone by since my last post. I've been trying to keep things steady for the kids. Partner's been working regularly, bringing in a bit more money, but trust me, the mood here is still pretty high. I thought a birthday party for our youngest at the local bowling alley would be a fun distraction, so I went ahead and booked it. The kids were excited, and honestly, I needed a break from the usual grind. So, the day of the party comes, and of course, my partner shows up late. Really? It's a freaking birthday party, and you can't make it on time? He strolled in after most of the kids were already there, and I could feel the eyes of the other parents on me. So annoying. I tried to keep it cool and act like it was no big deal, but inside, I was fuming. The kids noticed too, asking why Dad was late, and I had to come up with some kind of excuse on the spot. During the party, my partner was just there, you know? He barely interacted with the kids and spent more time on his phone than anything else. Like, dude, it's your kid's birthday party. Put the phone down for an hour. One of the other parents even came up to me during the party and said she was concerned about how distant he was. She asked if everything was all right at home. I just brushed it off, telling her it was probably just work stress. I didn't want to freak the kids out with any drama, especially on a day that was supposed to be fun. After the party, I was packing up the decorations and stuff, and I found an unopened bill buried in there. It was for a credit card my partner had opened without discussing it with me first. I was livid. I confronted him in the kitchen about it while the kids were playing in the living room, thinking they wouldn't hear us. I asked him what the bill was for, and he said it was for necessary expenses. Necessary expenses? Please. When I asked him what he bought, he got all evasive and just said stuff we needed. What kind of stuff? I've got a pretty good idea of what we need around here, and it doesn't involve a new credit card. A few days later, the school called me about unpaid fees. Just what I needed. My partner assured me he would handle it. It's been days, and he hasn't done squat. I ended up paying the school fees from my own savings. Yeah, that was fun. Just what I need, to dig further into my savings when we have no money to spare. Then, on the weekend, we went to the park for a picnic. It was supposed to be a fun family day. The kids started playing with other families, and my partner fell asleep on the blanket. I took the chance to talk to another parent about how overwhelmed I felt. She suggested a community yard sale to raise some extra funds. I liked the idea and started planning it, hoping to sell some stuff. My partner wasn't thrilled when I brought it up, saying it would be a waste of time. I went ahead with it anyway, gathering stuff and posting about the sale online. On the day of the yard sale, my partner refused to help set up. He just stayed inside playing video games. The yard sale ended up being a success, though, bringing in more money than I expected. I was relieved. We needed it. Later that week, my partner got a phone call while I was cooking dinner. He stepped outside to take the call, and I overheard snippets of a heated conversation. The guy was fired up. When he came back in, he was acting all weird, avoiding eye contact and changing the subject when I asked who called. I decided to check our shared computer for any unusual activity. I found a bunch of messages from someone I didn't recognize, and they were talking about money and payments. I confronted him about it. He got all defensive, insisting it was nothing and claiming he was just trying to help a friend. Help a friend? With what? I decided to keep an eye on his spending. A few days later, I found a receipt for a new gaming console he bought without telling me. I lost it. I confronted him again, and he accused me of not trusting him and being controlling. Family dinner night came, and the air was thick with tension. We sat there with the kids, trying to act normal. My partner made a joke that fell flat, and it was like silence just hung in the air. The kids sensed the weirdness and asked if everything was okay. I wanted to scream, "No, everything is not okay," but I didn't. As the evening went on, my partner stormed out of the room after a small disagreement over the kids' bedtime. I just focused on the kids and tried to put his behavior aside for the night. They deserved better than all this drama. The next day, things got even more interesting. I found out my partner was planning to meet up with someone from his past. Not cool. I'm not okay with that at all. He's been acting shady for weeks, and this just raises all my red flags. I don't know what's going on, but I need to figure it out and fast. Edit. It's been a few weeks since my last update. My partner's meeting turned out to be harmless, just an old friend. We talked through it, and he agreed to be more open about his past. I've been focusing on self-care, starting a part-time job, and getting support from trusted friends. Am I the idiot for announcing my pregnancy at a family dinner despite my mother-in-law's skepticism? My husband and I have decided to start trying for another baby. I really want this baby. I love my first child, and I'm ready for another baby. However, I'm terrified of how my husband will treat me when I'm pregnant, and I'm looking for advice on how to cope with these fears and get over them. My first pregnancy was unplanned when we were engaged. We figured since we were planning to have children after we married anyway, that going through with the pregnancy made sense. Then I lost my job, and we received an eviction notice because the landlords were selling the property, with the move-out date being right after the baby's due date. Job searching was a nightmare, and I had no idea how to navigate lying at interviews and then dropping the pregnancy bomb. My now husband told me to just focus on the baby, that he would support us, and that after I gave birth, I could start looking for a job. However, he very quickly began to completely resent and hate me. I know that the root of it was the financial and mental stress he was under supporting us. I don't think he realized how hard it would be, but he was so annoyed at me every time food made me sick, every time I had a craving, and every time I asked him to lift something heavy. He never wanted to hear baby name suggestions. I actually picked our child's name with a friend. He complained every time I bought anything for the baby. I was suddenly no longer fun. I couldn't go out drinking all night anymore. I was tired and sore all the time, and we were now completely broke. He complained constantly that he didn't know what to do to help me, even after I told him I just needed a glass of water and a hair tie. He told me he wasn't planning on taking paternity leave, as his boss told him it was pointless for him to. I just said, okay. At that point, I entirely focused on the baby and trying to get through it. Once my bump started to show, all intimacy desire on his end came to a halt. I'll never forget him physically recoiling when he accidentally touched my bump on one of the very rare occasions we did have intimacy. There was so much more that I can't fit into one post. But the lack of physical attraction was probably the worst part. I didn't realize how much of my self-worth I placed on being attractive. Not being able to afford maternity clothing and the bits I could afford looking awful really didn't help at all. Labor, I had a lot of family support, which was good. Once the baby was born, he did a complete 180. He took paternity leave and was upset he couldn't take longer. He panicked at the hospital because he didn't know if we had everything we needed. He looked so ashamed after I told him I had already bought secondhand essentials with my dwindling savings. After I said the only thing I couldn't get was a baby monitor, he rushed out to buy one. He did diaper changes, night feeds, and walks everywhere. He's a really good dad. On our end, the romance resumed immediately after the birth. Suddenly, the hugs and kisses were back, and after 6 weeks, he was begging for intimacy, although he had to wait a lot longer. Somehow, that was more upsetting to me. It just really fueled the thought that it was me being pregnant that turned him off me, since now that I wasn't, he was all over me again. It made me cry a lot. On his end, he insists that the financial stress and moving house ended the life of his intimacy drive. It had nothing to do with how I looked. After I had the baby, things calmed down and his intimacy drive returned. We've talked about it in depth a lot since. I've received nothing but apologies and reassurances. He was stressed out and scared. He had no idea what was going to happen after the baby, and everyone in his job kept telling him his life was basically over. Being the sole breadwinner was a huge strain on him. On my end, I know that I was probably very demanding and annoying. I was sick all of the time and always complaining. It's been years since, and we're in a much better financial situation. We're married. We own a house. I'm back at work with much better job security. We both want another child. I want another one. The situation is entirely different, but I'm terrified. What if he just goes back to hating me and finding me ugly again? I don't think I can handle the scorn and disregard again. Currently, I keep telling myself that no matter what, I want another baby, me. And I'll make sure I look and feel gorgeous for myself and just myself. I don't need him to be nice to me or attracted to me. I can be nice to myself and like myself. But the thought of him acting the same way still makes me very upset. I also now know from experience that even if he thinks he'll be different, how he feels in the moment is another thing. So yes, I'm looking for advice on how to not feel upset, believe him that it'll be different, and tips on how to feel good about myself while pregnant. It doesn't help that I hate most maternity wear. It's all so frumpy and basic to me. Now for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. Have you been in therapy after your first pregnancy, either couples or individual? I am currently pregnant with my first, and I don't think I could ever do this again if my partner had been acting like your husband. I don't think there are any amount of words or apologies that could make it better. Words are easy, actions matter so much more, but he can't exactly show you he's changed without you being pregnant again. Comment 2. This is a terrible idea without any other assurances. Does he have a plan in place if he suddenly gets these thoughts again? Or does he simply think he won't, and you be damned if he does? Now for the update. 2 weeks after my last post, my husband and I talked about trying for another baby. Honestly, I didn't know how to bring it up, but I did. He was surprised, but happy. We talked about how much our lives had changed since our first baby. Then, I had to bring up my concerns about how he treated me during my first pregnancy. I had to. I told him I was worried that he would act the same way he did during my first pregnancy, and I just didn't know if I could handle that again. He insisted he had changed and would be supportive this time around. After some back and forth, we decided to have a family dinner with both of our parents to announce our plans. We thought it'd be a nice way to share the news and get their support. The dinner was at my parents' house. It was cozy, with a big table filled with all the food you could imagine. My mom really outdid herself, and my dad was his usual funny self. I swear, he could make anyone laugh with his stories. My parents seemed excited when we told them. My mom even teared up a little, which made me feel good. My in-laws were more indifferent, to be honest. My father-in-law just nodded, and my mother-in-law gave a polite smile. I guess they weren't as excited as my parents, but whatever. During dinner, my dad talked about how wonderful it was to have grandchildren, and that really warmed my heart. I could see my husband's face light up too. After dinner, my mom suggested making it a family tradition to celebrate every milestone. I liked that idea a lot. My husband joked about needing a bigger house for more kids, and everyone laughed. I think we all needed that laughter. The conversation shifted to my sister, who is also considering starting a family. She's been married for a couple of years now, and I know she's been thinking about it. A week later, I started feeling sick, but I brushed it off as just a cold. I didn't think much of it, but then I decided to take a pregnancy test just to be sure. I was a little nervous, but I figured it was better to know. The test came back positive, and I was excited yet nervous. I decided to keep it to myself for a few days to surprise my husband. I even started thinking about how I would tell him. The next family gathering was at my in-laws' house for a holiday dinner. I was excited to share the news with everyone, but I had to keep it under wraps for a bit. I prepared a special dessert to share the news subtly. It was a little cake with white frosting that I thought would be perfect. During dinner, I suggested everyone play a game where they share hopes for the future. I thought it'd be a fun way to get everyone involved. When it was my turn, I announced that I was pregnant. The room went silent for a moment, and then my husband beamed with joy. His face was priceless, and I couldn't help but feel so happy. My mother-in-law looked skeptical, though. She immediately questioned if we were ready. I could feel my excitement drop a little, but I brushed it off. It was just her being her usual self. Days later, I overheard my mother-in-law talking to my husband in the kitchen. I wasn't trying to eavesdrop, but I heard her expressing doubts about the timing of the pregnancy. I felt a pit in my stomach. I confronted my husband about what I heard. He brushed it off, saying it was just his mom being overprotective. I didn't buy it, though. I decided to take matters into my own hands and plan a surprise party to celebrate. I invited close friends and family, making sure to keep it a secret from my in-laws. I knew my mom would be excited to help out, and she was. At the party, I announced my pregnancy again, and everyone cheered. It felt so good to celebrate with people who were genuinely happy for me. My mother-in-law looked visibly upset, but my husband stood by my side, showing support in front of everyone. It made me feel like we were a team. My sister also announced that she was pregnant, which shifted the attention away from my mother-in-law's snarky comments. My sister's news was a shock to everyone, and I was so happy for her. A week later, my husband surprised me with a planned getaway, just the two of us. It was so thoughtful of him, and I really appreciated it. We went to a cabin in the woods where we could relax and spend quality time together. We talked openly about our future and how we could support each other better. It felt good to communicate, and I think we both needed it. Mini update. After our getaway, my husband and I agreed to keep communication open. I decided to tell my manager about my pregnancy to discuss maternity leave. She was supportive and assured me we'd figure everything out. I also started researching maternity clothes that I'd actually like to wear. I found some stylish options that made me feel more confident. My first doctor's appointment went well, and I was relieved to see a healthy heartbeat. Overall, things are going smoothly, and I'm feeling positive. Am I the idiot for leaving my parents' house after my husband stormed off over a political argument? My husband and I have been married for 8 years, together for 11 and a half years. We are finally expecting our first child, a daughter, in just 30 days. We are very much on the same page when it comes to morals and parts of politics that overlap. For example, pro-choice, and the government has no right to have any power over that. That being said, this isn't necessarily about politics, but caused by politics. We live about 3 to 3.5 hours away from our immediate families, which means we see them only 1 or 2 times per year. We would see them more, but we have to go to them. And between my family only living there half the time and his being very busy and incapable of planning really anything, it just hasn't happened. My family is very Republican, not in the sense of worshiping Trump, but in the sense that Democrats and liberals are completely unreasonable, immature, narrow-minded, uneducated sheep. Yes, it's been a problem. Years ago, I finally snapped and said that if they wanted a relationship, politics were to never be discussed. This didn't go over well, and we were no contact for well over a year. Since breaking no contact about 4 years ago, the pandemic was a factor, as I worked directly with it. It has been an extremely slow process to build a relationship. It is filled with holes because of many other issues refusing to be addressed, but it is something. My husband's family is very moderate immediate and extremely liberal extended. That being said, his siblings are some of the most important people in his life, and their opinions hold some of the highest values. He especially values the relationship between him and his older sister, 10 years older, and her husband. I'm not nearly as close with them, but still adore them for all they have done and sacrificed for my husband and their younger sisters. Yesterday was the baby shower we planned with our families. Things started rocky because the older sister, her husband, their adult son, and mother-in-law couldn't come, equating to 1/3 of our guest list. I was devastated, as I was especially looking forward to spending time with them. After some comfort from my husband and a long shower, I pulled myself together to still try and have a nice time. Well, then things wound down, and we went back to my parents' house, where we were staying for the weekend. I should have known better than to expect things to be okay and the elephant in the room to continue being ignored. It started with my dad bringing up RFK as a pick for Health and Human Services, and then my husband bringing up Gates. It didn't take long for a full-blown screaming and name-calling fight to erupt. I 100% believe in the points my husband was making, but did not agree with how he handled things. Was my dad equally terrible? Absolutely. He was no better, but it was clearly my husband escalating things until he stormed off. He threw our things back into the suitcase, texted me he was leaving, and asked if I was coming. I should probably mention that I have a freeze response to situations. Directly involved or not, all I can do in high conflict situations is stay still and silent for even minutes after things stop. So when my husband was asking me if I was leaving with him, I was still trying to process what just happened. Eventually, he left the house and had his cousin pick him up. For the next 2 hours, I was trying to do damage control with my parents. I tried to explain how and why these things scared us so much, and how we feared for our daughter. But it really didn't get through. The whole time, my husband was texting my parents, saying how they are never allowed in our home again or allowed to be in our daughter's life. Finally, around 10 p.m., I had enough and decided to just pack things up, get my husband, and drive back to our home. It was not an easy decision because I was emotional, exhausted, and did not think driving 3 hours in the middle of the night through country roads was safe. And I knew I would be stuck driving the whole way because my husband was at a bar with his cousin. I left with both my mom and I crying, and my dad just focused on getting the car loaded. Picking up my husband was a separate nightmare. He didn't want to leave at first, and when I finally got him in the car, he started yelling at me. He took my lack of going after him or leaving the house with him as me choosing my parents over him. That I didn't actually believe in the same things because I wouldn't stand up for him. He then just kept demanding I pull over and let him out, as it was clear where my loyalties actually lie. I was hysterically crying and just begging him to stop, as I just wanted to go home. Aside from my sniffles and sharp breathing, things were quiet for about an hour when my husband said he just cut off his family too. That surprised me, so I asked why. Turns out none of them voted. This got my husband upset all over again, and he began badgering them, saying how he couldn't understand that as a nurse, his sister, why she would refuse to vote on things that would directly impact her and her work, and that it was a slap in the face for all they went through growing up, reliant on government-funded services. She texted back, "I don't have to justify a damn thing to you," and my husband proceeded to do the same thing with them as he did with my parents. We traveled in silence the rest of the way, and I got us home just before 2 a.m. It's now the afternoon of the same day, and I have no idea what to do. I feel a bit betrayed because I had no say in any of this, but I'm stuck dealing with the fallout. I feel broken and guilty because the life I had pictured for our daughter with loving extended family just got ripped away. I feel torn between my husband and our families, and I have no idea what to do. I have not talked to my husband today at all. To be honest, I don't even know what to say. What do I even do? I don't even know what I want, but I do know that I'm not feeling happy or excited about having our daughter anymore. Any advice would be appreciated. Now, for a few comments before the update. Comment 1. I just want to provide the gentle reminder that you had also told your parents this. Years ago, I finally snapped and said that if they wanted a relationship, politics are to never be discussed. Undeniably, your husband went hard and acted unhinged, and he may not regret it, as is his privilege. However, he can't expect you to jump because he says so, and he absolutely cannot control you. It's hurtful. But I'd also be upset at my dad for crossing a clear boundary, as he was first to do so, and I'd remind him that I don't know what he expected in doing so. I'd make it clear how upset I am with him for putting his politics above our relationships and crossing a clear boundary that ultimately had already ended our relationship once. I'd give your husband space, but refuse to drop it and insist on counseling, if not for him alone, then together to discuss how you all would like to move forward. Comment 2. I don't have anything to say regarding the politics stuff, but one thing caught my eye: the life I had pictured for our daughter with loving extended family. I was a kid whose parents made sure to keep everyone around, even people they disliked or disagreed with, because they wanted their kids to grow up with a loving, extended family. Once my sibling and I were old enough to reason, we realized we didn't like some of these folks. When we tried to tell our parents that we would prefer not to engage with them, they said that everyone had put in a lot of love to ensure that we received as much love as we did, and that we shouldn't respond to their love with a lack of it. Every concern my sibling and I had was too small. A problem for them to accept that the decision they had made years ago of keeping terrible people around was wrong. Turns out they hadn't done this for their kids after all. Now, for the update. A week has passed since the big argument at the baby shower. Can't believe it's only been a week. Feels like a year. My husband has moved out temporarily, staying with his brother. I got a text from him saying he needed space. Not like I have any clue what to do next. Family members have been reaching out to me and him, trying to play mediators, but it's a mess. My dad suggested we meet for lunch to talk things over. He wanted to sort things out. Not sure how that's possible when it's already crazy. We had lunch at this local diner, a favorite spot from my childhood. It was our go-to for greasy fries and milkshakes. Not sure how I felt about going there to discuss the mess of my marriage. The atmosphere was just awkward, like you could feel the tension. I sat across from my dad, who looked like he hadn't slept in days. He was upset. Can't blame him. He expressed disappointment in my husband's behavior during the shower. I tried to defend my husband, but that just made my dad more irritated. I told him the stress was affecting the baby, and he quieted down. Can't believe I used the baby as a last resort, but it worked. After lunch, my dad handed me a letter meant for my husband and urged me to give it to him. I really didn't want to act as the postman for my estranged husband, but here we are. I reached out to him via text, asking if we could talk. He responded with a short message saying he wasn't ready. Typical. 2 days later, I decided to just go and visit him at his brother's apartment. When I arrived, I overheard him arguing with his brother about their family's politics. Guess they're still going at it. The brother yelled at him, questioning why he would cut ties with his family over a disagreement. I mean, it's a fair question, but his brother was being a bit dramatic. I knocked on the door, interrupting their argument. My husband looked surprised to see me, but he didn't invite me in. We're still at that stage. I handed him the letter from my dad, and he looked skeptical. He opened it right in front of me and started reading it aloud. The letter contained an apology from my dad, but it also criticized my husband's views. He crumpled the letter and tossed it aside, refusing to engage. You could see the anger building in him. A few days later, I went to visit my mom for some support. Honestly, I needed her to just listen and validate my feelings. At her house, we had tea while discussing the ongoing conflict. She suggested hosting a family dinner to bring everyone together. I agreed to help plan the dinner because I wanted to mend relationships. I was all in for fixing this mess. We decided on a date and sent out invitations to both families. On the day of the dinner, my husband reluctantly agreed to attend. I could see he was not thrilled. The dinner started with awkward small talk, and you could feel the tension. My dad brought up the recent argument, and that led to a heated discussion. My husband stood up and declared he was done trying to please everyone. It was intense. The dinner ended with him storming out, leaving me alone with my family. In the following days, he completely cut off contact and focused on his own family. It was like he disappeared from his phone. I took action by sending a group message to both families, laying out my boundaries. Not fun. I had to be the adult here. Weeks passed with no communication from him. Can't even remember the last time we spoke. I started planning my next steps because I can't just wait around. I decided to host a small gathering with close friends, wanting to reclaim my space. During this gathering, I got a call from my husband, wanting to meet. Can't believe he actually reached out. We agreed to meet at the same diner, where things had initially gone wrong. How fitting. The meeting turned into a discussion about our relationship. By the end, I proposed a temporary separation while we both sorted our lives. Can't believe we're at this point, but here we are. To answer a few questions, my husband is still living with his brother, and our baby is due in 3 weeks. If you like this video, you'll probably like these too. Also, while you're here, please consider subscribing. It's your support that keeps this channel alive and allows me to make better and longer videos. Have a great day.